Hello. Hopefully you're here for the OpenStack Infra project update, because that's what this is. We'll go ahead and get started. So usually, to start these things, I'd like to thank all of our gracious infrastructure donors. They provide us cloud resources to do what we do. And without them, it'd be very difficult to merge all the code and support our developers. So thank you to these clouds. Some are public, some are not, but they are all very valuable contributors to the things that we do. And I've just got them up there in alphabetical order. No particular importance in the ordering there. Oh, in fact, we've got at least one of them here, so thank you. So you may have heard this OpenDev thing has started to happen, which is probably the biggest piece of news and one of the more recent things that we've done. We're all, I think, very excited about it. It probably would have called it the OpenDev project update, except I had to decide to do this project update like 3 or 4 months ago, and we weren't sure if we would be this far along. But yeah, what is it? It's a neutral name to host projects under, in particular open source software projects. Over time, people have realized that the way that OpenStack builds software with our community-run infrastructure is something that would be nice to have available to a broader set of software projects. And at the same time, they don't necessarily want to be an official OpenStack or an affiliated thing. So we've tried to separate the idea from our community-run infrastructure from OpenStack, the cloud software. A lot of this came out of the OpenDev event that was held at the Vancouver Summit about a year ago now. And there was a talk there on free software needs free tools, and we've built this stuff using free software for free software, and we'd like to take that a step further. That said, OpenStack isn't going anywhere. It's still our biggest user. I think at last check, there's still over 95% of the test utilization for the stuff that we do is OpenStack. So recently, we migrated all of our Git hosting off of the OpenStack.org namespacing into under the OpenDev name. In that transition, we went from a cgit style Git hosting to Gitty, and we renamed everything from git.openstack.org to opendev.org. The Garrett remains for code review, but it is now hosted under review.opendev.org. And projects like, say, Zool can have their own independent namespacing in this system, which is exciting, I think, for Zool and others that are interested in this. To ease the transition pain, we've done extensive redirecting for the old names under the old domain names and pathing to the new names. And Jeremy did much of the work for that, so thank you. Well, and Jim as well. There are other services that we've migrated as well. So DNS, we've been hosting DNS for a while now using things under the OpenStack domains. We've transitioned that all over to OpenDev, and so we're hosting DNS for OpenDev itself and Zool and for some other stuff that we'll talk about a little later. Our PBX asterisk server is available under the OpenDev domain name, and we have Mailman hosting OpenDev mailing lists as well. So let's take a look, because this is something we've been excited about. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is what the OpenDev landing page looks like. It tries to give you an overview of what it is, why it's there. But then, as I said earlier, projects that aren't OpenStack now have their own namespacing. For example, Zool. So here's a list of a variety of Zool projects that are hosted under Gitty. And there's no overt reference to OpenStack, even though this is all the same infrastructure that we've built for OpenStack. Zool is able to take advantage of that. And if you're familiar with the old cgit stuff, this looks a little bit more like modern web design and is a little bit nicer to look at. So that's made people happy as well. And as I said, Garrett was updated as well. The OpenStack logo is gone, but we're still hosting OpenStack. We're still doing, I don't know, how many thousands of changes a week or a month. It's still all there, but Zool, again, has its own namespacing. It might be kind of small. We can get to that. So yeah, just a quick, if you haven't seen it yet, hopefully you will see it at some point, and this is what it looks like. So things to do. We want to continue moving the generally applicable tools that we run to the OpenDev namespace, things like Etherpad, Paste, the wiki, and so on. Not all services will move likely. Some of them are fairly OpenStack specific, and so we won't bother to transition those off into a generic namespace. But there are many that we would like to transition. Part of that includes switching to Let's Encrypt certs. Now that we control DNS for OpenDev, we're able to issue those fairly easily, which is nice. But then we also want to make it easier for projects to come on board. We know that the existing project creation stuff is a little bit clunky. You kind of have to know what you're doing and follow our extensive docs closely, otherwise it doesn't work. And then we want to improve the management for that, because we've got existing projects that might want to move around and claim kind of their own space in the system. So that was exciting. We did that very recently. A lot of other stuff has happened in the last 6 months or so. One of the big things we've been working on is modernizing our config management, and I've talked about this in the past. Part of that is getting off of old Puppet 3, and we are now almost entirely on Puppet 4. There's like 3 hosts remaining to migrate, which is great, because now we can use more up-to-date Puppet modules and so on. But we also support deploying services without Puppet using just Ansible, so our DNS system is deployed using Ansible alone with no Puppet. And then we also have Docker-based deployments as well. So Git is running entirely out of Docker with Docker Compose. And then we're able to build and test those images using Zool with future states. And so we can kind of ensure everything is working before we go and deploy that, which is great. And as mentioned earlier, we'd like to move to more Let's Encrypt certs just as a management system. Ian has done a ton of work to automate this almost entirely for us, which is awesome. We're using acme.sh, which is a collection of shell scripts that will do the Acme dance with Let's Encrypt for us. We're doing DNS-based verification, which allows us to deploy new services, get their certs deployed without updating any A or Quad A records in DNS, which allows us to have things kind of hidden off to the side until it's ready, and then we can update DNS, point at it, and we're done. Let's see. So if you've been here at the summit, you've probably heard a lot about Zool. Zool was built for the OpenStack project, the infra project by Jim. Some other people helped. There's a lot of overlap in the team still. We still work together because we're running probably the largest Zool installation that there is. And we use it quite a bit. We're basically beta testers for Zool. So if you're pulling down Zool, a release that Zool's made, likely we've already run that for at least 24 hours or so. And if it's worked for us, it's likely to work for you. One of the things that we've done recently is add new tenants, which is a feature that Zool v3 added that we hadn't taken advantage of quite yet. So we've got a tenant for Kata, OpenDev, OpenStack, and Zool. I expect that this will likely grow over time as we add on more projects that are willing to kind of manage their own Zool infrastructure. Well, not infrastructure, but their Zool configs. So looking ahead for the infrastructure project, like I said earlier, we'd like to continue to transition some of the existing services we run out of the OpenStack namespace into OpenDev, switch over to Let's Encrypt certs, and make things easier to consume. And as part of that, improving the CI system for projects that aren't OpenStack, which includes making it easier to get tenants and bootstrap that configuration for those projects. And hopefully, as we do this, people that are interested in using that will help us build this system too, right? This has been an OpenStack community-run venture, and hopefully as people come out of other locations, they'll help us build that as well. So if you need to get in contact with us, we're still on Freenode, and primarily in the OpenStack infra channel. I imagine probably over the next 6 months, we'll be transitioning to the OpenDev channel, which is #OpenDev on Freenode. Similar with the mailing lists, we're kind of in this weird point in time where we've just transitioned the Git hosting, but we've now got to get the rest of everything moved over. We're going to be here for the rest of the summit, which is like an hour or so. But we'll also be here for the PTG. I'm here all 3 days of the PTG, so if you've got questions or things to talk about, I'll be around. And you can find our docs on the OpenStack docs. Again, another thing that will eventually transition. It's just we wanted to get the big thing out of the way first, and now we can focus on some of these smaller details. So now questions. So I've already got one question, And one was if we'd be fixing the Git web links in Gerrit. And yes, Monty has fixed that, except it needs a Gerrit restart. Gerrit doesn't load its configuration changes unless you restart it. So the config is updated on disk and everything. We just have to restart the service.
Like there's two levels of that fix. There's the current fix that we need to restart Gerrit for is to make the links work, but that'll be using the internal Gerrit service to do that. There's also stuff that Jim's fixed in upstream Gitty to allow us to be able to replicate refs changes to the Gitty services. And once that's all in a happy place, we figure out the replication story, then we can turn on the other patch, which would be to make those Git web links actually point to the opendev.org Gitty service so that it'll look all pretty and like that. So
Right.
There's the short term and the longer term.
Right, so really quickly for the mic and the camera. There's two things. The fix I've just described where we restart Gerrit, that will go back to using Git web to render those links. But longer term, Jim has fixed Gitty where we'll be able to replicate refs changes content to Gitty, and then we'll have Gerrit point you to Gitty for that content. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question about migration of Zool configuration.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to do anything else apart from like setting the configuration files to new namespaces and new names for the project, any other choice?
Yeah, so the question was, when we did the Git hosting transition, how did we update, or what did we have to do to update the Zool configs to make that work? And Jeremy wrote an extensive script to go, actually, when Gerrit was offline, it went in and modified all of the Git repos and committed those changes to the repos in place. And that did the replacement of the old names to the new names. And that allowed us to start Zool without any configuration errors. But that didn't mean that all jobs were necessarily going to work. And so since then, what we've done is we've basically worked with individual projects, and even for our own jobs, we've had to go through and update things that didn't catch. For the most part, though, it was handled by that script, and then now it's just, oh, this doesn't work anymore. We'll go update it. Anyone else? I'm not seeing any takers. All right, well, I think that's it then. Thank you for coming, and I hope you find OpenDev, that transition stuff, as exciting as we do. Thank you.